Welcome, sir.
Welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, good, good. Thank you.
We are waiting for the others to join by 11 a.m.
No problem. I just wanted to come and test my system. Um,
So you were talking about change of topic. Have you decided? Then I can
oh,
announce it.
it's so this is my topic: International Women's Day, reaffirming gender equality.
Okay, I'll just write it down. International Women reaffirming gender
Gender
equality.
equality.
Thank you, sir.
Not at all.
Hello. Good morning to all of you.
Good
Are
morning,
you
sir.
are you getting my voice? Is it clear?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
No? Okay.
Sir,
Because I am Dhanbad actually.
I see. No, sir, we can hear you. And
O-
Dr. Das is also there. He has also
Okay.
joined. We'll start off at 11.
Okay.
Dr. Das, we are streaming on YouTube also. So many people will be joining through YouTube.
Okay, that's good.
So that we can start exactly at 11.
Yes, sir,
Because
we'll
many of
start
us
exactly at 11.
also belong to YouTube. So there will be no problem.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Das, what is the local time at US now at present?
I'm not in the US, I'm in New Delhi.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's 11 a.m. now. We can start off. So today is International Women's Day, reminding us once more the importance of gender equality. A very good day to all of you. Grievance Redressal Committee for Sexual Harassment of Women at Dr. B.C. Roy Engineering College tries to inculcate gender sensitivity among students of both genders through programs that spread the message of gender equality in order to eliminate gender bias and gender insensitivity with a long term objective of creating responsible citizens. The NSS cell of Dr. B.C. Roy Engineering College aims at a holistic social development of its students. We hope that today's session will help our students to evolve as complete citizens the country can boast of. May I now request our Honorable Director, Dr. Piyush Palroy, to give his introductory speech. Please, sir.
Good morning to all of you. I welcome you all in this gender sensitization program organized jointly by the National Service Scheme and Grievance Redressal Committee for Sexual Harassment of Women of Dr. B.C. Rai Engineering College, Durgapur. And this session will be addressed by none other than our distinguished speaker, Dr. Obhijit Das, who is the Associate Professor in the Department of Global Health, University of Washington, USA, on the very specific topic, women in nations' pillars of strength. You know that gender discrimination is often the result of conscious and unconscious bias acquired through generations of conditioning. Generations of conditioning, a recent Harvard Business Review study confirms the connection between the gender discrimination at work and gender bias. It is therefore very crucial at this address to address on gender sensitization so as to create a positive and inclusive workplace atmosphere, which will help enhancing organizational culture, organizational growth, its progress of women leaders, and lower levels of gender conflict as well as harassment. As for example, Uber India, as for example, I am just giving one example actually. Uber India, for instance, has been conducting gender sensitization training program for all its driver partners across the country to address the society concern of their growing female customer base. There are a variety of techniques that you may be knowing that including the group discussions, then cross survey techniques, then interviews, focus groups, then mediations, and specific evaluation matrices to compare policies with behavior and identify problem areas that need redressal. I am confident that this gender sensitization program being conducted by BCREC would help sensitize our employee of the institution on gender related issues, informing and guiding employees on appropriate ways of addressing and interacting with female colleagues and clients as well as all the partners. Then facilitating discussions between male and female employees with the goal of highlighting private as well as discriminatory workplace policies as well as practices that need attention. Empowering women by facilitating access to monitoring and professional guidance on harassment and workplace bias. These are the major points that I have identified. I think our very respected speaker will touch upon all these points so that we can make a very conducive environment inside the campus of BCREC and there will be absolutely no case of gender harassment. With these few words, I welcome you all and over to Krishna Roy. Please.
Thank you, sir, for your motivating words. I hope our students have learned from it and we will see gender equality and love for each other in our premises. Our resource person for today's session, Dr. Abhijit Das, is a doctor with training in obstetrics, pediatrics, and public health with over 30 years' experience in clinical work, training, research, and policy advocacy. His areas of interest include health and human rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights, population policies, men, masculinities, and gender equality, health equity, health governance and accountability, decentralized planning and monitoring, evaluation of complex social and health interventions. He is managing trustee of Center for Health and Social Justice, a health policy research and advocacy organization in India. He is also a clinical associate professor in the Department of Global Health at the University of Washington in Seattle, USA. He is the global co-convener of COPASA, a global health rights and social accountability network, and a co-founder and earlier co-chair of Men Engage Global Alliance. a global alliance of NGOs working with men and boys on gender equality. He is also associated with various health rights networks in India, including the national chapter of the People's Health Movement. He has been a member of several policy advisory groups, including the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, National Human Rights Commission, and the UN Women. He has written extensively on issues related to community health and on men's involvement in gender issues. He is on the advisory boards of several academic centers in different universities across the world and has been invited as a speaker to several international conferences, including the UN and the EU, on issues related to health, family planning, HIV, AIDS, and gender. Today, Dr. Das will speak on International Women's Day reaffirming gender equality. Now, may I request Dr. Das to share his valuable experiences with our students? Please, sir.
Thank you, Professor Krishna Roy. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And thank you, Dr. Piyush Palrai, for inviting me to speak to your students and to your faculty at the BC Roy Engineering College. It's a great privilege and an honor to do so. And it's not my first time to speak to colleagues in Durgapur. I had earlier come on the invitation of Dr. Satyajit Bose of the Mission Hospital, who also informed me of this particular program. And I'm very, very privileged to be speaking to all of you. Without further ado, let me go to my presentation and give me a second. Can you see my screen? Can you see
Yes,
my
sir.
presentation? Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
yes,
Thank
sir.
you. I'll just, okay. So today I want to speak about reaffirming gender equality on the occasion of the International Women's Day. You know, it's a great honor to be speaking on this day, but you must be wondering, why does a man speak on International Women's Day? And this has been a constant question to me for the last 20 years that I've been working on gender issues. And one of the things that I sincerely believe is that till gender equality and women's empowerment, as Dr. Piyush Palrai was also mentioning, doesn't become a concern for everybody, we will not get gender equality. So it's important that all of us, women, men, all of us, people who are from the third gender, we all believe in gender equality. Before I talk about gender equality and talk about the issue of how gender bias can be eliminated, let me give you a brief history of the International Women's Day. The International Women's Day actually is a very, very old sort of celebration. It was proposed in 1910 at an international conference of working women in Copenhagen, and from 1911, that's 110 years ago, the International Women's Day was celebrated in several countries. The issue of 8th March actually came up along the Russian Revolution. It was then the Russian calendar of 23rd February, which was 8th March in the Gregorian calendar, and there was a movement for bread and peace. So International Women's Day, the women's issues that have been raised have been a diverse set of issues relating to women's right to work, women's right to vote, women's ability to hold public office, for peace, as well as for discrimination. In 1975, the United Nations adopted the 8th of March as the International Women's Day. And since then, every year there has been a theme. This year, the theme is talking about women in leadership positions achieving equal future in the COVID-19 world. However, there's another event that I would like to highlight, which is in 1995, there was a uh, global conference called the CEDAW, global conference called the Fourth World Conference on Women at Beijing. And that conference celebrated its 25th year last year, and I'll come back to that a little later. When India was independent, the status of women in India was quite low. From the point of birth, we had high rates of female infant mortality. In childhood, we had child mortality. In childhood, we had very, very low literacy rates. As we all know, girls were married off as children. Even today, we have a large proportion of girls being married off before the legal age. Women had frequent childbirths, many childbirths, and a very, very high rate of maternal mortality. Women's participation in the formal workspace was low, and women's participation in public space was also very low. Overall, what we find is in India before independence, women had a higher mortality rate than men. So this was the situation before independence. In the constitution, the idea of equality was embedded completely from the very beginning. If you look at the fundamental rights, the core principles which decide on how relationships are going to be placed in this country within independent India, we find equality coming way up in the fundamental rights in Article 14, Article 15, Article 16. So there is issue of equality before law, no discrimination by way of race, caste, sex, place of birth, special provisions for women and children, equality of opportunity, and state policy to be directed to enable women and men to have equal livelihood, equal pay for work, and to secure just and human conditions for work and for maternity relief. So the issue of equality, the issue of gender equality, was embedded into our constitution. So it's now over 70 years since we are independent. It's over 70 years since the idea of equality has been embedded in the idea of India. But what do we find? We find there have been some changes. I would say there have been many changes. Literacy rates have become very higher compared to what it was earlier, but it's still not equal. Life expectancy, and this is interesting, India, the life expectancy of women, as in all developed countries across the world, has now started becoming more than that of men. We find that in all developed countries, women have 5 to 7 to 8 years more life expectancy. In India, it's still 3 years. In some states like UP and Bihar, women's life expectancy is still a little lower than that of men. An important matter for concern is the issue of sex ratio. In India, the sex ratio at birth is low for girls. India, the sex ratio for girl children is low for that of girls. Now, this means that something is still happening through which less girls are being born, more girls are dying early. Higher educational enrollment, as we see, is now nearly becoming equal. But what is very worrying is that the labor force participation of women is a third of that of men. And recent reports show that this is becoming lower. Women are leaving the workforce for various reasons, when they get married, when the family income becomes high. And there are reasons why family does not think women's participation in the formal workspace is something that is desirable by existing gender standards. Similarly, we find that women do 4 to 6 times more household work or care work. Now, these are recent studies. It has come out through a survey that was done last year, report released last year. And we find that women's workforce participation is low and women's household participation is very high. And I mention this because this cannot be changed by state policy alone. We need to think about what we do at home. The other issue that we see is ownership of land. We find women's ownership of land is very, very low compared to that of men. And domestic violence that women have to face is very high compared to that of women. So while overall there have been some changes in the situation of women, there are many, many things that still need to be addressed. So the gender equality that we are talking about, the gender bias that we are talking about that needs to be addressed, needs to be seen in the light of these indicators. So I was coming back to the issue of the International Women's Conference that took place in 1995 in Beijing. This year, the 25th year, that was last year, this year is the celebration of generation equality. And the big question for all of us, and especially since I'm talking to college students who are of the younger generation, is the challenge of how do we achieve a generation, a new generation, a future generation which talks about equality. And the challenge before us is realization of women's right for that equal future. And the challenge that we all have is to adopt behaviors, adopt actions, adopt attitudes which promote generation equality. So before I go forward, I'd like you to have a small test. I'll have a small set of visuals which I want to show you. I will send you this link on the chat box. What I would like you to do is, as I show you each picture, to go to the poll. It's a poll on Windows. It's a poll on Google, sorry. It's a Google form poll. If you click that link, you should get it either on your computer or on your phone. And as I show you the picture, right on the poll, if you think that person is male, female, or other. So you'll get a screenshot, which is somewhat like this. The screenshot, you'll get it on your mobile or on your computer screens as you click the link. And let me give you the link on the give me a second. So I have sent you all the link, and I will go back to the presentation. Can you see my presentation again? Have you received the link?
So we have received the link, but we can't see the presentation.
Just a second. Can you see it now? Can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
It's okay.
Thank
It's
you.
okay.
So here's my first picture. Try to identify whether the person, the shaded person, focus on the shaded person, whether the shaded person is male, female, or other. And don't tell me now, just write it on the, do it on the poll. This is the first picture. We'll have 10 such pictures. This shaded person who's repairing a motorcycle, it seems, male, female, or other. Person making chapatis on a wood stove fire, male, female, or other. Person in a gym with both arms raised, male, female, or other. Bottle feeding a child, male, female, or other. Classroom with small children, male, female, or other. Looks like washing clothes, male, female, or other. Somebody with a child cutting vegetables, male, female, or other. Fixing a truck tire, male, female, or other. Clothes shop, male, female, or other. Okay, So the question now is, have some of you been able to do the poll? Let me come to see the results. This is the first one that we had, playing football. Who is the shaded person? I wonder how many of you had the shaded person as a young boy or a male. We will go to the scores a little later. Now let's come to the mechanic. This is a female mechanic repairing a motorcycle. I wonder how many of you had this correct. Let's go to the third one. Person making chapatis on a wooden stove. It's a woman. Probably we all had this right. Person in a gym with arms raised. Oh, this is a woman. Maybe some of you had it right. Person feeding a baby with a bottle. It's a man. I wonder how many had it right. School children, classroom, and a man. Washing clothes, sitting with another woman, a man. I wonder how many had this right. This one. Would anybody like to see what this person is? It's a man. How many of us are used to seeing such pictures? This one, replacing or fixing a truck tire, it's a woman. And this is the last one, in a clothes shop, person wearing a sari, that's a man. How much did we score on 10? I did have the Google form out, and we can check the scores. So if we see the distribution of scores that I have, there are 18 responses. And let me quickly also share the screen so that you can also see that. We have one person scoring 10. We have one person scoring 2. And the median score is 10. So we have a whole range of scores. Among the 20 people who have filled in this questionnaire, we have a wide distribution of scores. I wonder why this happened. I wonder why we were making this mistake. Let's go back to the presentation. So what were we trying to do? We were trying to make a guess. We were trying to make a guess based on body shape. We were trying to make a guess based on dress, styling, how is the person standing, what kind of work that person is doing. And we were getting confused. We were getting confused because some of the expectations that we have from men and women, girls and boys were not getting met. If they were met, then all of us probably would have got the right score or the same score. But since I chose pictures which were a bit confusing, like a woman fixing a truck tire, a man doing vegetables, a woman fixing a motorcycle, we may have confused it because the picture that it finally emerged did not match the social expectation that we have. And oftentimes, what we decide on what is appropriate for male or female is based on this social expectation. It is not a biological issue. So, what we do is we create a social stereotype or a social set of expectations about what is appropriate for male and female. And male and female are essentially biological categories which get converted into social categories. And this social category is called gender. So, gender, unlike sex, sex is fixed, it's at birth. It's to do with sexual organs, it's to do with secondary sexual characteristics, it's to do with how your body hair is distributed, it's to do with how breast development is, it's to do with how the pelvis is shaped, and it's finally to do with reproductive roles. But what we do is through a set of social actions, which I'll come to a little later, we create social differences in how men and women, boys and girls, ought to think and ought to behave. How should they speak? What should they do and what should they not do? What should they wear? What should they not wear? How should they feel? What should be their thoughts? And for college, what subjects to they study? For the workplace, what kinds of jobs are appropriate? So it all gets distributed according to a social set of expectations, which are then internalized and become internalized social actions and feelings. So, sex, biological, gender is completely social, completely socially constructed, socially defined. We are trained. And the important part is where biology or where sex is the same everywhere across the world, is same across time. Gender is different in different places, it is different at different times, it is very diverse and it is changing. The biology or the sex doesn't change. And this is extremely important because when we are talking about gender bias, it is to do with a set of rules which create differences between what men should do and what women should do. But since change is possible in gender, we can remove gender bias. We can become gender sensitized. We can bring about gender equality because change is possible, change is happening, and all the time it takes place. Change is not usually possible in sex. It's only possible through a kind of sex reassignment surgery. And this is an important point because all gender equality depends on all of us trying to make this change. So, what happens because of this social difference is that men and women get different roles according to society. Women, as we saw, stay at home, look after children, do all the housework. Men are expected to go out, become the breadwinners, and they cannot be expected to cook and clean. So, what we do is from early childhood, we teach our daughters to do something else and we teach our boys to do something different. Another and extremely important thing is the difference, the social difference, the gender difference with women and men means that women's access and control over resources becomes extremely low. So we find women do work, but the moment the family income is high, women are asked not to work because it's not important. Women are not supposed to be the resource controllers. Today, we have low resources. Women, please go out to work. Women are supposed to only work at home. Property is usually only in men's name. There is a law that property should be equally distributed after the death of parents, but it doesn't happen oftentimes. If we look at educational institutions, engineering usually for men, home science usually for women. And then we have the behavioral stereotypes. Men are supposed to be strong, independent, rational, tough. Women, weak, emotional, dependent, shy. And these behaviors are promoted from early childhood through a process of socialization. And here we find that the same piece of work, cooking, when it is done free and when done at home, it is done by women. And if we go to the streets, if we go to the restaurants, if we go to the public space, where the same act of cooking is being done for money, it's the men. The same man who is cooking outside will rarely be cooking inside. There have been some differences, especially I know during COVID, a lot of men who were stuck at home, who couldn't go out, were experimenting with cooking. But usually, by and large, men avoid cooking at home. The daily chore of cooking is left to women, while the same man may be outside the home, no matter where, in a five-star restaurant or in the home, street dhaba, it's men who are doing the cooking. So this is a very, very simple way in which the same work, add money and it becomes men's work. The same work, take away the money, put it at home, and it becomes the women's work. So what we have is a social system which is driven by beliefs in society, and beliefs are in our head. They create certain expectations, which we call norms. Men and women adopt certain roles. It becomes sexual division of labor. Girls do this, boys do that. And finally, the access to and control over resources and the decision-making power becomes different for men and women. So the point is that at the end of the day, women do not decide what is going to happen to their own lives. Women don't decide what is going to happen to the family, where women rarely decide what is going to happen to the community and to the country. If you look at the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha, we find that women's participation in political systems is very low in India. We needed to push through a Panchayati Raj system in order to promote 1/3 and then in some states half reservation. But if we look at the Vidhan Sabha and we look at the Lok Sabha, the men are preventing women's reservation there. If we look at students' union in colleges, we can find whose participation is more. Who becomes the president of the students' union? Is it the women? Is it the men? These are things that we have to think about in our own lives and around ourselves. So here I want to show a small video. And in this video, I want you to focus on the girl. There are two girls in this short video. I want you to focus on these girls. I will not show it like this because I'm having a difficulty showing you the audio of the visual. Instead, I will show it to you like this. Can you see the video?
जरा जल्दी जल्दी हाथ मुंह धो के जल्दी से खाना खा ले बेटा। दीदी पानी पिला दो। कभी खुद भी पी लेता। आज पार्टी है वहाँ, थोड़ा मदद करने के लिए चल। नहीं अम्मा आज नहीं, बहुत सारा होमवर्क है। चल बेटा थोड़ी डस्टिंग ही कर दियो। ले रघु खुद से खा ले बेटा आज। नहीं माँ खिला के जाओ। बहुत देर हो रही है रघु, खुद से खा ले बेटा। खा ले राजा, देर हो रही है बेटा, जल्दी कर मीनू। खिला। अरे जल्दी कर, बहुत देर हो गई। एक दिन नहीं खाएगी, कम खाएगी, बिगड़ जाएगा। कुछ जल्दी कर, बहुत देर हो रही है।
Has never seen a shot he doesn't like, but look at this spot.
टीवी देख रहे हैं। दरवाजा खोल मैसी। तू खोल युवराज।
And he just cannot get
ओए युवराज नहीं मिताली राज.
The upgrade and take it into the net. What an but that's what he's all
Hi
about.
mom.
Hi beta.
Excuse me for being excited, people, but we've just witnessed a goal to a wake up the catatonic. Astonishing still.
Thank you.
मम्मी आपको पता है दीदी समर वेकेशन में कहाँ जाने वाली है?
कहाँ जाने वाली है?
क्रिकेट कैंप.
क्रिकेट.
सर ने लेटर भेजा स्कूल से.
क्रिकेट कैंप.
इस बार तो हाँ बोल दो मॉम.
देख मानसी, बैडमिंटन वगैरह तो ठीक था, पर क्रिकेट के लिए नहीं भेज सकते बेटा.
प्लीज मॉम, आई एम अ डैम गुड प्लेयर.
तुम्हारे कोई फ्रेंड्स जा रहे हैं क्रिकेट कैंप?
व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ अ क्वेश्चन इज दैट?
मैं पूछ रही हूँ कि कोई गर्ल्स जा रहे हैं क्रिकेट कैंप.
राघव से पूछा था ये सवाल फुटबॉल कैंप भेजते वक्त.
वॉच योर टोन मानसी. तुम क्रिकेट कैंप नहीं जा रहे हो. लड़कियों की बात अलग होती है. पीरियड.
अनबिलीवेबल मॉम.
So what we find here is the story of Minu and Mansi, two girls, and how their mother and how their brother are dealing with them and their expectations. And this is probably the story in many houses. What we find is the mother, because of certain social conditions, has different rules for the son and different rules for the daughter. And this is occurring in two different kinds of social situations. The first story was slightly lower middle class. The second story was higher middle class. In both situations, we find that the mother treats the son differently and treats the daughter differently. And oftentimes that is why we often say Mahila Mahila ki dushman hoti hai in gender. But what is important to note is what the brother does. The brother does not take sides. The brother knows that the rules are different, and the brother does not take sides to encourage that the daughter or the sister gets equal opportunities. So the question is, how do Minu and Mansi, the two daughters in this case, how are they feeling when their brother does not take their sides and their mother is clearly has two sets of different sets of rules for her son and her daughters? So what we find is there is a biological difference to which there are social conditions in which creates the gender difference. But these gender differences, when they are enacted in society, they become unfair. They are not the same conditions for the girl and for the boy, for the man and for the woman. And the women feel bad. The women here, the girl here feels bad. This is gender inequality. We have to understand that some people are feeling bad because of this. We have to understand that some of us are playing very silent roles, the roles of the brother. We are not intervening when something is unfair. We are not intervening even when we may feel that this is not correct. Until we can develop that sensitivity of understanding that this particular kind of gender rule in society is not fair, gender inequality will continue. So, some sort of brief summary of what we know about gender. We often confuse gender with sex, less over time because now there has been sufficient focus on gender, and we know that sex is biological, gender is social. But the big difference is often we think that gender has to do with women. Gender is not to do only with women. Gender is to do with all of us because it is embedded in relationships. Here, roles were being played out by that boy. The fact that he told his mother that I want to be fed, the fact that he told his mother, look, my Minu has been given invitation to the cricket camp, he is raising a particular controversial situation and then disappearing. And this is something that happens from childhood through a process of copying, rewarding, and punishment. And not only does it stay in the home, as was mentioned by Dr. Piyush Pal Rai, these become institutional practice. And often they are institutional practice which we need to do policy analysis. We need to understand which institutional rules are actually creating gender discrimination. Overall, these gender rules and roles restrict women. And many of us are sort of aware of that. But what happens to men and boys is that they get a set of privileges. And as men and boys, and this has been one of the important lessons from my own work, is until and unless boys can recognize these privileges, as long as men can recognize these gender privileges, we are not going to come towards gender equality. The other thing is there is a cost of these privileges. So men and boys have to also face certain compulsions. Men and boys are the ones who are expected to be breadwinners. They cannot be expected to stay at home. Men and boys are expected to be tough. They are expected not to cry when they face adversity, which means that they have less coping mechanisms. So these compulsions create a particular kind of situation for boys, which is also harmful. That's why we know that boys take much more risks. Boys, earlier, if we look at youth, they are doing various risk-taking activities from driving fast to fighting with each other, and the rates of mortality among young men is higher than that of young women, especially in more developed societies. Why is this so? Why is self-harm so high among men? Why is suicide so common among farmers in India? These are because of certain compulsions that men have to face because of the male privileges that they often enjoy because of this gender inequality in society. So what is happening to men? And this is important because we often forget that in a gendered society, there are rules for men. Men are expected to be strong. Men are expected to be participating in economic activities. Men are expected to be leaders. But men, as I said, also have to face certain compulsions. So these are the costs. We know that there are fewer women in jobs. We know there are fewer women in public spaces. We know that there is sexual harassment, mention was made about it. But we also know that actually, when it comes to violence, boys have been trained through violence. Boys and men do much more violence to each other. For each act of violence against women, there is an equally large number of acts of violence of men to men. And this could happen in the playground, this could happen on the streets, this could happen as gang war, and this could happen as war. Men also can display anger, but do not have the ability to show other emotions. We discourage them to show care. We discourage them to play with dolls. We discourage them to be frightened. We discourage them to show love and affection. And as a result of it, men's emotional relationships are usually shallow and less meaningful, whereas the relationships that women have with each other are much more deeper. They can share much more substantively, and they can grieve and show care much more effectively. So if we are going to bring about gender equality, we need to recognize that there have to be actions with women for women's empowerment, but there also need to be actions with men and boys. Men and boys need to also become humanized. They need to understand that there are compulsions that men and boys have to go through, which often takes away some of the aspects of the tenderness, the nurture, the caring that they can benefit from. We must also realize that gender is not limited to men and women. There's a whole range of non-binary gender issues, non-binary sexual orientations that are slowly, as we recognize human rights, we realize that everybody is not typecast in the same way. So we have to be respectful of all forms of gendered and sexual orientation and diversities. And this is a space in college where people experiment with themselves, and we have to create a respectful environment where this is possible. And until and unless we talk about gender equality, we will not be able to also come towards a more peaceful and sustainable future for all of us. But how do we achieve gender equality? And here I have two pictures. And this picture illustrates that the same resources, when distributed in a more meaningful way, can enable all people to reach the goal of fulfilling their expectations. Opportunities can be equally shared. The picture on the left, there are three boxes which are shared equally among three different people, one extremely short and one extremely tall, to watch a match. The one who is very short cannot watch the match even when they get a box. But when we go to the right side, that person gets two boxes instead of one. This is the concept of gender equity. This is the concept of redistribution of resources depending upon a person's needs. So, in order to achieve gender equality, we have to recognize that everybody does not have the same requirement. Everybody does not have the same history. Everybody does not have the same opportunity in the past. So we will have to make a differential recognition. Many people are, they have resentment against reservation. But until and unless we create special opportunities for people who are disadvantaged, they will not be able to see the match. And this is extremely important to recognize. So this is important. The second is recognizing gendered privilege. And this is where the issue of men and boys comes in. Suppose there is a family with resources only to send one child abroad, or let us say they are from a village and they can only send one child to a private engineering college in Durgapur. And there is one son and one daughter, twins. Do you think both will get an equal chance of using the family resources to go to a course in engineering which is paid? Is it an equal chance? Even if they receive the same marks in their high school examination. There is a social preference for one gender to go for an economic course. Similarly, if there's a music show late at night and both son and daughter want to see it, do you think if it's a late night music show, they will get the equal opportunity to visit it? Is the family going to say, no, you should stay at home, it's going to be late at night, it's not going to be safe, and for somebody else say, go ahead, you can go there with your friends? How do we make those choices? Does somebody get more opportunity compared to somebody else? This is a question I want to leave with you. Now, this kind of questioning is the issue of gender analysis. If we have to move towards gender equality, we all need to start doing gender analysis. And gender analysis is examining the differences in the lives of men and women in various spaces, in the family, in the community, in educational institutions. How do men and women behave there? How do others respond to men and women? How are the institution rules? Do they provide men and women equal opportunities? Until and unless gender analysis is done, we cannot devise methods to overcome the bias that we have talked about. So gender analysis first, and then steps to remove the gender bias, and that's the way we can achieve gender equality. So what then is the way forward? First of all, do we believe that men and women, boys and girls can have the same aspirations? Can girls learn mechanical engineering? That's the question. Do girls only need to run computers or need to do things which are not hard, which are not mechanical, which are not technical? Can we have equal expectations from girls and boys? Can boys be expected to wash their dishes at home? Can boys be expected to clean up at home? Can boys be expected to help in the kitchen at home? Do girls have the equal opportunity and equal encouragement that boys have? Until and unless we do that, we will have social rules which are unequal and unfair for the daughters. Now, the other thing is boys have to recognize that they have certain privileges. Until and unless boys recognize the privileges, until and unless the boys recognize the compulsions, it's very difficult to move towards gender equality. Otherwise, we will be stuck in gender discrimination. So our way forward is for all of us to engage in analysis, for all of us to understand how we treat men and women in any particular situation. It could be the home, it could be the college, and then examine what is happening. What are the rules? Do we need to change the rules? Do we need to change ourselves? Do we need to become more affirmative? Do we need to be more assertive? Do we need to recognize our privileges? And do we need to create more opportunities for the others? Until and unless we do things differently, until and unless we do things through a deliberate process of analysis and action, our commitment to gender equality will not, generation equality will not be achieved. And I'm sure that a college like the Dr. B.C. Roy Engineering College, with the support that you have from the faculty, the support that you have from the Sexual Harassment Committee, gender equality is something generation equality will be able to bring. Thank you very much.
After this wonderful session, I'm quite sure you will have a lot of questions in your mind and you would like to ask Sir. I'll hand over to Professor Sohini Ghosh to kindly conduct the question answer session.
Thank you, Dr. Das, for that illuminating speech. Now, if any of our participants have any questions to us, Dr. Das, please ask your questions in the open forum.
May I please submit one point actually? It is not a question, it is a query. Dr. Das,
Yes,
I
please.
just want to know, do you feel that with your wide experience, that education is the main bar amongst the girls actually because of this discrimination? It is one of the major points. Because you see that in USA as well as in European countries, this type of discrimination is not too much. It is there, but it is not to that extent. In respect to and understanding in the society. What is your view?
So I did not hear your full question because your voice was cracking. But from what I can understand, you're talking about whether discrimination exists in Western countries. Um, One of the things that we have to recognize, the idea of equality is not a very old idea. And as I showed you through the first part of my presentation, in India too, the idea of equality needed to be embedded through the constitution. So since the idea of equality is not a very old idea, there are many social hierarchies which exist in what you could call non-modern societies. So in modern societies, the idea of equality is stronger, but it is also under stress. It is not that it is universally accepted and universally practiced. So let us say in Europe, the participation of women in education, the participation of women in the workforce, the participation of women even in the political space is much higher than, let us say, in South Asia. But does it mean that the idea of discrimination does not exist in so-called European and North American countries? It does. It is constantly being challenged. So at this point in time, the idea of equality, social equality, gender equality, racial equality, caste equality, they are all under stress. But it is a strong belief, and it is now a universal belief, because after the Second World War, the idea of human rights became established. And human rights essentially means that all human beings are equal. Before the Second World War, the idea of all human beings being equal was not socially accepted. So this is a new idea. This is still being sort of challenged. It's still being, so on one side there is promotion like you are doing, and on the other side there are challenges, which society happens through older social structures. So there is a contest, and hopefully we will be able to establish the idea of equality firmly as the days go by, and through programs like this.
Okay, thank you.
If anybody wants to ask any more questions, please ask them now. Sir, I have one question myself. What would be the relationship between women's safety and gender equality, or generational equality as we are calling it? How much is women's safety important in this case? Can we have equality without having safety first?
Important. So dilemma, safety first or equality first? So, see, my personal views on this are very, you could call it, how do you want to have safety? Safety through fear or safety through respect? You can have safety through extreme police state, so to speak. You have, so non-tolerance or zero tolerance is important. But the question is who makes the rules? You can have safety through rules which are made very top down, and those rules are sort of very strictly followed. They are strong punishment, and so-called everybody is safe. But everybody is in a state of fear and coercion. So the point is, if there is going to be freedom of thought, freedom of expression, respect for each other, a sense of freedom, then the idea of fear and freedom cannot coexist. So there has to be safety with respect. You cannot have safety with fear. Now, I hope that explains your answer. Safety is important, but
Yes.
equality is equally important.
Thank you, sir. It does. There is one more question coming up. Is that how does schools or educational institutions assist the girl students to achieve leadership qualities and to be leaders? As you said that we have a shortage of women leaders. So how does educational institutions help in it?
So, educational institutions have spaces for leadership all along. So, let us say you have, if I start from school, you have monitors, you have class representatives, you have elected bodies, you have people who lead a class in the sort of march pasts, so to speak. Those are leadership positions that you have to promote women to uh, occupy. Women will not, girls and women will not automatically go there from, because from, you know, school or the educational institution is not the first social institution they experience. They have also experienced home, and many times, and in home the socialization has already started in a way that girls are not encouraged to stand up, girls are encouraged to be reticent, girls are encouraged to be shy, whereas boys are encouraged to be much more sort of bold. So the school has to create opportunities, and some people do not like this word, spaces and reservation. So until and unless you reserve space, women are not going to occupy that space. They are reticent by socialization.
Okay, sir. That was very nicely explained. Do we have any more questions?
Questions can also be sent on the chat if people want.
Yes. Okay. I think that is what we had. The explanation itself was so succinct and clear that everybody seems to have been satisfied with the talk itself. So, as we reach to the end of our webinar, I feel extremely privileged to accord a vote of thanks to our guest speaker, Dr. Abhijit Das, for his illuminating and encouraging speech on reaffirming gender equality. The students of BCREC are highly motivated from this talk. Thank you, sir. I would also
Thank you.
take this opportunity. Yes, I also take this opportunity to thank our director, sir, Dr. Piyush Pal Rai, for his encouragement and motivation. I would like to thank our Register Madam, Mrs. Ruma Mitra, for her unflagging support. I hereby thank Professor Shomudip Das for helping us with the YouTube streaming of the event, and Professor Monalisa Chakraborty for designing the flyer. I thank Professor Krishna Roy, Coordinator of Grievance Redressal Committee for Sexual Harassment of Women, for co-organizing the event with NSS cell of BCREC. I also thank Joint Coordinator of NSS, Professor Sunil Chaudhary, and the entire NSS team for their dedicated teammanship and active involvement in making the webinar a grand success. I thank all the participants who have joined us over Google Meet as well as YouTube streaming. Thank you all. And with this, we can conclude our event.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.